Well, when you look at our history of the 1900s, we always seen that it was always struggling and trying to make a different community, a better community and everything. And it all works in patterns and everything. It seems like it's every 20, 25 years that there's a change and everything. And we're in that change. I started about 5 years saying top of the morning to you, and the reason I did that was I wanted to be my trademark. I want to get people happy. When you go up to somebody and says, hello, how are you doing? Good seeing you. You know, right away, you can tell a person by their handshake and if they're really paying attention to you. But I can get on the phone today and I'll make my phone call and says, top of the morning to you. Right away, you've got that person smiling. Now you've got some reason for they'll start laughing and they'll say, how are you doing? I says, I'm just as hunky dory. And I said, that means I'm fantastic.
Well, gentlemen, you're sitting in a small restaurant in Moundsville, West Virginia.
Moundsville, West Virginia.
Moundsville, West Virginia.
Moundsville, West Virginia.
Moundsville, West Virginia. Moundsville.
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 Moundsville, West Virginia.
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 Moundsville.
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 We're in Moundsville, West Virginia.
Moundtown, Moundsville.
Yeah, we're in Moundsville, West Virginia.
Moundsville, Moundsville.
Moundsville, West Virginia.
One more time.
Well, honestly, I had to explain Moundsville to a lot of people that I went to school with, even though they're from West Virginia. And they thought that it was like this little rinky-dink town that had nothing at all. We have a Walmart and a Kroger and an Exxon. I was like, we have regular gas stations and regular stores.
Here is the city of Moundsville. Moundsville is located right on the Ohio River. That is where we transport our coal. That is where we transport a lot of the chemicals and a lot of the products that are made down south that are shipped through the city of Moundsville by the Ohio River. And also, this is where we have great fishing in the Ohio River. If you come out here in the summertime, you'll see a lot of speedboats and recreation.
Well, my ancestors on my grandfather's side got here about the mid-18th century, which would be my 7th great grandfather, Joseph Tomlinson Jr., and his two brothers were the first white settlers here in what was called the Grave Creek Flats. My 7th great grandfather actually, according to some local history, discovered the mound by him deer hunting.
The mound was excavated in 1838. It actually was discovered by the settlers. The earliest settler family was the Tomlinsons. They had a cabin just down the road there a little bit.
And he was pursuing a deer, the way the story goes. And the deer reportedly went around this hillside, so he went around the hillside after it, stalking it or whatnot. And then after a while, he realized he's walking in a circle. Things started looking familiar. So you got to think back in these times, the mound probably had trees all over it and brush and everything else. And he went home and got Elizabeth Tomlinson, my 7th great grandmother, had her stand at one point around that little hillside. And he counted his paces around the circumference of the mound.
The Grave Creek Mound is a prehistoric burial mound. It dates to about 250 to 150 BC, so that makes it a little over 2,000 years old. It was built by a group of people we know as the Adena people. That's not what they called themselves. We have no idea what they would have called themselves because it's so long ago. There are no direct oral traditions that have been passed down. So archaeologists, in order to talk about a culture, a lot of times they will assign it a name. And actually Adena is named after another mound in Ohio. And that one was more thoroughly excavated and described, even though it was excavated later than our mound here. They would have most certainly been the ancestors of some of the Native Americans who are alive today.
Okay, I'm going to take you up Jefferson Avenue. Right here is the bank. I'm trying to think of the business. That used to be Buick. The old cars, Buick. That used to be the garage, and that's where you bought all Buicks when I was a kid. Right there on the corner, that used to be known as the West Virginia liquor store. That's where they used to buy whiskey when the stores sold whiskey. Over here used to be the Five and Dime. Remember Five and Dimes as a kid? That used to be. And this place right here used to be a pharmacy.
If you go back into the 1950s and before, there were probably 30 small local grocery stores in the scattered around Moundsville. First of all, there was 15,000 people in the community rather than 9, and a lot of people didn't have automobiles, so the grocery stores were located where people could walk to them.
There was a steel mill in Benwood, just up the road, 7 miles. The whole town revolved around that steel mill. I mean, when you went to work in that steel mill, you didn't think, what am I going to do tomorrow? Am I going to have a job tomorrow? That steel mill was there for your father, and that steel mill was going to be there for you. And yeah, you could strive for something better, but at the same time, you always had the mill, and there was this sense of community. And once we started in West Virginia, you started losing the industry. You lost the community.
There were plenty of jobs when I got out of high school. The chemical industry, coal mining, the steel industry.
There were just so many businesses here that you didn't have to worry about what you were going to do tomorrow because people were crying for labor. Most of it in its early history developed along the river. We had a broom factory, a stogie factory, whip factory, all kinds of things. And then that developed more later in history because of the minerals along the river, the chemical plants, the coal mines, the steel mills, all those things developed because of the river.
In the early 1900s, that's when Moundsville really made its mark into town because of the gas. And you might as well say, in the oil and the coal back in that time.
Why is there so much commerce here? There's so much commerce here due to the fact of the richness of our natural resources. Okay, let's see what industry comes here first. It's actually the glass industry, glass and then steel. They come here because there's a natural resource, which is coal. Then coal begets natural gas. So that's why industry originally comes here.
And there were a number of different industries in the community. The largest being Fostoria Glass Company.
Fostoria Glass.
Fostoria.
As far as Fostoria Glass, they were the #1 producer of glassware in the world.
I remember Fostoria made the glass works, all the glassware. I have my mom's collection of the American pattern, and we have the museum here, which is a great addition to the community.
Chemicals were hot down, go down the river, and there were tons of chemical plants just lining the Ohio River.
There was Allied Chemical north and south.
PPG, Mobay, all those places. I guess PPG probably made chlorine. My father worked there for a while. My mother worked at Allied Chemical as a secretary, but then she became a secretary at public schools, so she wanted, it's a better gig. So
At that point in time, the mills were here. And with the mills, you think of mills as, you've got a bunch of guys who are unskilled, but at the same time, you've got people who are skilled machinists working in a mill doing things. And so there was a schooled working class here. So it was not a problem at all to take people from specific industries and plug them in.
There was U.S. Stamping.
U.S. Stamping Company.
I remember relatives visiting. It was a big thing to go to stamping. They made the big roasters in the different cookware. I still have my mom's roaster that came from there. It's certainly not Teflon, but it is wonderful.
There was Marx Toy Plant.
Louis Marx and his brother David Marx started Marx Toys in 1919. Never had their own factory until 1933. And their first factory was in Erie, PA. They made mechanical toys, wind-ups. One of the first toys Louis Marx made, called a climbing monkey or monkey on a string. It's called a monkey on a stick. I wonder how they came up with that name. Push your tail down, run across the floor. In 1934, he came to Glendale, bought the old Fokker Aircraft Company building. This plant ended up being the largest of all the plants, employing up to 2,000 people. 1 year later, they went to Girard, PA, opened up the third factory. 1937, he went to Birmingham, England, opened up the fourth factory. By 1955, he had a total of like 13 factories worldwide. He was on the front cover of Time magazine in 1955. The Christmas issue. He got the title of the Toy King because in 1955, 1 of every 3 toys made in America was made by the Marx Toy Company. Some of the famous toys the Glendale plant made was the Rock'em Sock'em robots, the Big Wheel. They could make 9,000 big wheels per day. Pretty amazing. Johnny West and Jane West, a 12-inch action figure. And also Marx Toys play sets. A play set is like a Civil War set, Army set. When a new TV show would come on, Gunsmoke, he made a play set. Wagon Train came on, he made a play set. So the Glendale plant made all the play sets.
Toy plant. When I worked at the post office, we sorted all the parcels for the toy plant. When I first started there, I was a sub for 10 years and I had my own route after that. And we would get box truck after box truck after box truck of these toys, G.I. Joes, Big Wheels, Fort Apache, all those wonderful things they made. And we shipped them all over the country for the toy plant. Then right before Christmas, they bought a box truck for our 5 and 7 employees at the post office. I thought, I don't have kids, let the guys with the families have them, I don't need them. Boy, was I wrong. I was wrong, I could be rich. I want to tell you, gentlemen, where you can get the best donuts in the country. Best donuts in the country.
Quality Bakery right here, right there. That's Quality Bakery. You get their donuts when they come out of the oven, oh my goodness, you die. You would die for that donut. There ain't nothing better in this world than a donut come out of the oven. That is the awesome donut, glazed donuts. You got a good glaze. Right there, this empty lot, right here is where I grew up. My house used to be right here. When I grew up, all the neighbors that lived here, they looked out for each other. Back then when I grew up, and I don't know if they do it today, and I'm not saying they do, but when I grew up, the neighborhood raised you. In other words, you ate at somebody's house when they had dinner, and when they told you to go home, you went home.
It was pretty simple in the 50s. Everybody knew everybody. People were pretty friendly. It was a small town. It was larger population than it is now, but there's a lot more people living in areas that are not part of the city now than there was then. It was nice. It was typical.
Well, in the 50s, life was slow and probably a whole lot more intimate than it is now. There wasn't a whole lot to do. There were a couple of movie theaters in town that people took their business to, and that was entertainment. Also, back in the 50s, there was a center of town by the school where they had Friday night free movies. You know, that was the thing. Other than that, you went to the ice cream store. You know, you went and got ice cream and walked the streets or did your summer walks. The biggest ice cream store was right next to the Mound, and people would go and get their milkshakes and their ice cream cones and take a walk to the top of the Mound. And you could look out over the city, look out to the river. It was, you know, you go up there and you would think, man, Indians used to look out from up here. You go up there and you look around and see what you thought the Indians saw. You know, it was just but like I said, life was slower and people thought slower now, back in those days than they do now.
It was a close-knit. The people that were in business were very congenial and were very helpful. But things have changed. Some would say for the better. Some would say we'd like to go back to it.
People find it hard to believe that I was the mayor of the city of Moundsville. It was rough for me when I went to high school, when I was in grade school. I started school when I was segregated. On your right, gentlemen, where that trailer, right here is where that building was at. Before it became integrated, that was the school that we had 1 through 12 went there. And one teacher, Mrs. McClendon, God rest her soul, she was our teacher. Well, I can tell you a story about, and I wrote an article about being first. I was the first African American to be on a basketball team here in town, first African American to play on a baseball team, first African American to be in a band here, and it was really rough. And there was times when I would want to quit. My mother would tell me, "You have to keep going because you're opening the door for somebody else." And I mean, there was a time when I was in band where the kids wouldn't even sit with me on the bus. We traveled on the bus. I had to sit on the horn cases in the middle of the bus because nobody would sit with me. I left Moundsville for a short period of time, and I came back. I couldn't even find a place to rent here. They would not rent to me because of the color of my skin.
Would it be like that today, you think? Or?
No. Oh, no, not today. No. It's a total different atmosphere now.
There is a lot of racism, upfront racism, and you notice it more if you're able to speak English as well as I do. I think a good dialogue would start with stripping away the stereotype of an immigrant and that kind of like anger towards that title. If you just took that away and you laid out both of their, both an immigrants and just typical white guys' struggles, and you just put them on paper, they would be like, oh, me and this guy would get along great. That's how it would start.
Well, we're all common blue-class workers, and we know what disasters are. We've had our share, but in 2001, we had a major disaster in southern West Virginia, which you classify like a 500-year flood. And we ask ourselves, you know, we have neighbors in need. It's our people in our own state. What can we do? And we know that you have Salvation Armies and Red Crosses that do fine things in cities and some things in the rural communities for a short time, but then what? So we felt we should take up a collection of material goods to try to help them get back into their homes and on their feet as they recovered. So we called the mayors of this county and asked if we could take up a collection in the community for 1 month in August of 2001. What could we do in 1 month? It was outstanding. We had over 45 tons and $6,000 donated. I remember one lady so clearly that came in. She was so frustrated, slamming car doors and the trunk, and she brought me a coffee pot. I said, my coworkers want to have a yard sale and they have all this nice stuff and they don't need the money, but we have neighbors that need everything. And I put my arm around her and I said, Marianne, it's okay. You have the coffee pot, someone else just came in with pots and pans, somebody's coming tonight with dishes. It's the little that means a lot, which became our motto, and it's together that we can make that difference and do it.
It's funny because the bank I work at, old people will come in and they'll say, I've been banking here for 100 years or however old they are. They've just been here forever and their families have been here like forever and they can trace generations back.
A lot of this area was inhabited by Cherokee Indians. The Cherokee used this mainly as a hunting ground. There weren't a lot of developments of Indians throughout this area.
For a long time, Joseph Tomlinson, the original owner, he wouldn't allow any excavation into the mound. If you think about it, this was the frontier. And they were still, fighting each other, the native people and the settlers and everything. So he did not allow digging into the mound because he realized it was a burial site. So not until he passed away did they actually excavate into the mound, which is why the date is 1838 for the excavation. And they excavated just about to the center and found kind of a hollow spot with rotted wood, which would have been the remains of what we call a log tomb. They found the remains of 2 people in there. There's a shaft up and down the middle of the mound because one of the ideas was to have a museum on the bottom of the mound in where that tomb was and connect it to the top where they were going to put an observation building. So when they were digging that shaft, they encountered another tomb about halfway up. The mound is about 60 feet tall, which if you think about it, that's pretty amazing. Somebody calculated. They didn't have bulldozers, but they filled up baskets with earth, 3 million of them. So not only did you have to fill up the baskets and drag them up there, you had to also go dig up the dirt, and you would have been using stone tools, maybe even shells from the river, and a lot of sweat and a lot of time. So this is a monument. 3 million loads.
Its claim was it was the largest conical burial mound of this kind in the United States. There are many others up and down the Mississippi Valley, the Ohio Valley.
Well, this whole area is built on mounds. There's mounds underneath of us where you're standing. This whole, that center mound, that big conical mound was the centerpiece sort of a much larger, layout of mounds.
There's still a small mound across from the high school, but there were many more beyond that. And I don't know when it was that they were leveled, but most of them were, and whatever artifacts and bones were all taken.
The mound was the first time that I learned about. It was my first time really seeing the experience of another group kind of being invaded and taken, because the mound used to have a bar on it. There used to be a big bar on top of the mound. They took it down, but it's just kind of like how much influence like the town has had on it, kind of stripping it away from like its people, things like that, and then just putting it up in a museum. I don't know, it's weird, it's bizarre, but.
A bar, like a drinking bar?
Yeah, the drinking bar. There used to be one on top of the mound.
It was neat to see. Do you know there's a bar? There used to be a bar on top of the mound. Isn't that bizarre? That is just bizarre. To think there's a bar sitting on a sacred burial ground. That's just...
It always distressed me when, I don't know if they still do, but they used to erect a Christmas tree on top of the mound at Christmas time, and I thought, made me squirm a little bit, you know? I mean...
The inmates actually did the decorating. They would go over and they'd string the great big old C9 bulbs and decorate the whole mound. Did a, build a tree on top, a artificial tree on top out of lights.
You could see it all the way over to Ohio.
And that was a thing that the city looked forward to each year. And then that was taken away because it's a burial ground. You can't do that. It's sacred. You can't do that. So that actual artifact of history was taken away from Moundsville, but they used to decorate the mound.
Now, while it was rather festive, in general, people have gotten more sensitive to other ethnic groups in general, including Native American viewpoints, and perhaps also a little bit more aware of the historic nature as a prehistoric site. And so, yeah, we've discontinued having the Christmas lights on the mound.
Growing up in Moundsville, I grew up in I was born in '69, so the majority of my growing up was in the 70s and 80s. In the 70s, when I was a little kid, there were actually seemed prosperous because there were like car lots and businesses up and down Jefferson Avenue. But in the 80s, things took a little bit of a turn because basically coal mines were laying people off. Businesses, maybe chemical plants, were closing. U.S. Stamping, which was a place that a lot of people worked, closed. Fostoria Glass closed. So a lot of people were losing their jobs and basically shipping out of town. So I think there was a pretty significant population decrease in the 80s, probably, I'm guessing. And a lot of that you think is your perception because you're a kid and you think, oh, everything was great because I was like 5, But I think that it was obvious enough, even to a small kid, that things were changing from the time you were maybe 5 or 6 to when you were maybe 13 or 14.
I think these jobs came here because of energy. In today's world, you look what's going on around us. I mean, we're building pipelines everywhere. You can build a plant in Florida. You can build a plant in Georgia. Where the ground's flat, it's easier to build something, and you can still get the gas shipped to you at a competitive price. Where in the past, the industry had to go where the natural resources were.
It was a different time. Of course, everything went overseas.
Down here where this trailer is, gentlemen, this is where Fostoria Glass House used to be. This is where Moundsville mostly worked.
That was a big one there because they were one of the largest employers in the town of Moundsville, so it was hard hit.
And as competition came in through other countries, they couldn't afford to compete any longer in the price of their glassware. So they were eventually bought out by other companies who also found out they couldn't compete against foreign glass.
The cost to run the furnaces and to keep an operation like that going, which I see here, but it's on a smaller scale and we're family. When you're trying to feed people, we can scale back when we need to and go full speed ahead when we need to, but when you're trying to keep people employed, it just doesn't happen. They couldn't pay the employees enough to keep them there. And it's not a job that you just hire someone off the street and expect them to do it. You have to be trained, you know, and not all people are going to have the skills they need to do that. So once a good worker left, you know, for more money, you know, pushing a broom somewhere, it's hard to get that good skilled work that was needed, and then just the cost of keeping everything going.
Louis Marx was 76 years old, and his sons or his kids never wanted to take over, so he sold it to Quaker Oats. They kept it for 4 years, between 72 and 76. Then they sold it to a company in England. They kept it for 4 years. 1980, they shut down.
Over 7,000 jobs were probably lost after the 1980s to the current time because of the loss of Allied Chemical North and South, because of the loss of Fostoria, U.S. Stamping, which were big industries and had a lot of people. Just so many factories that were here are gone, and they've never been replaced in the numbers. And so we are a declining population still.
And you know, we would read in newspapers around here about how the Chinese were dumping steel or the Koreans were dumping steel here at these extremely low costs. Something should have been done then, okay? And it wasn't. But you know, I don't know, but that's what's called capitalism, okay? If you can get it cheaper somewhere else, you know.
I think Moundsville's inhabited by ghosts in the sense that like people are still clinging on to wishing for the things from the past, and they're just they're still grieving. They haven't really accepted what has happened and what the possibilities are. You know?
I think they remember a time several decades ago now when the factories were working, the mines were busier, there were more mines, there was simply more employment, more money, the schools were filled, but those days have come and gone.
It's become an elderly community. In that sense, the ones who stay here as the younger people don't have anything but those jobs where they're waiting tables or doing the McDonald's jobs or Burger King jobs. And so we've lost a lot of our youth. And that attitude of getting a good education because I can go get a good job isn't even inspired by the gas and oil boom that we're having. Why not? Because they hire so few.
Anyone with a college degree should leave, I think. That isn't a popular expression here, but and they do. That's what happens. They do for lack of opportunity.
I think I thought I would leave early on, at like 13 maybe, because I don't know, it just seemed like I was attracted to the city. Even at 13, I wanted to be a drummer. And I was like convinced I should go to like New York or maybe, I don't know, I think I wanted to go to school at Berkeley because I'd seen an ad in like Modern Drummer magazine or something. You know, something you fantasize about when you're a 13-year-old with a lot of time on your hands because, you know, Moundsville's kind of boring. I couldn't drive, you know. I couldn't do anything super fun.
There's a lot of people who they want to get out. They want to see the world. They know that there's more to offer than just Moundsville and just West Virginia, that there's way more out there that they want to get out and explore and see more stuff, because a lot of people just get stuck here. They get stuck in the valley and they don't really leave Moundsville or Wheeling or this area, and they want to get out.
I can understand leaving because Moundsville doesn't have what the youth are looking for today. They're looking for diversity, or they're looking for different things, or they're looking for themselves, what they're looking for, I think. It's a small town comparative to what I've seen. And maturity is the only thing that would bring them back and be satisfied, I believe. That may be harsh, but for me, and I've told this to my grandkids, I said, what do you want out of this world? You want to set the world on fire, or you want enough for a weenie roast now and then? And they said, well, set the world on fire.
On our left, and this is one of many. This is the one of the RV parks they house the gas and oil. As you can look on the left, this is the laydown station where the gas and oil. And on your right, that's another laydown station. And when I say laydown, this is where they keep all their equipment, and they this is where all the men come to go to work. As you look at the RV park here, I'm going to show you a bigger RV. This is actually a small RV park compared to the RV park I'm going to show you.
Again, local political leadership has welcomed the oil and gas industry with open arms, with seemingly little thought to the negative consequences. And I'm not talking environmentally, although those are here aplenty, and I fear for the water quality in these counties up here. But more than that, the promised economic benefits are really short-term at best, and remarkably curtailed even in the present time. I mean, some of the counties where the fracking industry operates at the max have yet to show any significant boosts in employment. So there are local folks who have gotten employed, and God bless them. I'm glad that they've had these opportunities, but the numbers are remarkably small because there's so many men primarily that were well trained in the oil and gas fields to the west of us.
Yeah, I've looked into getting a job in the gas industry in the past, but you have to have so much prior knowledge or education, it's difficult to just jump right in.
What kind of education do you have? Do you have high school degree?
Yeah, I just have a high school degree.
When did you go to college?
Funny story. All the money I had saved up, it was either go to college or buy the house that I live in now, and I chose to buy a house. So I kind of skipped school and just kept working.
Are you happy with that decision?
Yeah, absolutely. I unfortunately know a lot of people went to college that their college degrees have landed them at Walmart. So, outside of large amounts of debt, most of the people I know that went to college, unfortunately, didn't go anywhere.
The city of Moundsville, we get nothing from the taxes of these people working here. But where we gain by these people living here, we gain in the restaurants, the Walmarts, we gain, we're in home rule, and we get 1% sales tax. Our 1% sales tax has doubled the money of income coming in the city of Moundsville.
When I look at the situation going on with the natural gas development, I have nothing against development if it's done proper, but what I see, you had people coming in making huge salaries that drove up our cost of living, and we have an elderly population on fixed income. It's making it very difficult to buy food and general things you need. You have a whole nother segment of people that maybe rented the same apartment their whole life, and then the landlord says, well, I don't want $400 a month now, I want $900 a month now. They can't afford it, so now they're out scrounging for housing somewhere. And you do have slum landlords, sad to say. Then you have a whole nother population, I think, in their maybe 20s, 30s that are going to be unemployable because they've had an addictions problem. So if they're unemployable and they should be the ones helping us as we age, we've got a gap. And I really think that's going to drive this area more into poverty situation with those certain segments of people. We've seen some of it already with the people we deal with here that come into Hidden Treasures or to the storehouse. They're very low, very fixed income, very challenged with making ends meet, work check to check, and sometimes that doesn't balance too well either.
This is the one hotel that we have, called the Sleep Inn. And it's mostly rented out to gas and oil. Over there, gentlemen, is Walmart. Welcome to Walmart. Walmart originally, the old council, when they first talked about Walmart coming to Moundsville, they didn't want it. They did not want it. In fact, the vote came down to where it just barely passed. They only voted at Walmart here by one vote. This used to be all coal mine property. This is where Valley Camp dumped their ash. And Walmart wanted to have their building here, and council didn't want them here. And it wasn't until it came to a vote where council passed it 4-3. Now they have the Walmart, and thank goodness they did.
Well, I really think we, the people, changed it. We wanted the gas cheaper. We wanted the parts cheaper. We got to the place that I don't think we really cared who run the business. We have a lot of outside people who run the business. We don't even know who owns what building sometimes now. Then you did. And sometimes change isn't all for the better.
I know that whenever Walmart first got here, my dad was completely against it. I think he's been in Walmart 2 times since it's existed. But the rest of my family, I mean, it's the place to go if you need like just random clothes or anything of that sort. So I think there is a sort of dependence on it, honestly, because yeah, you can get groceries at Kroger, but if depending on where you live, Walmart's easier. A lot of people I know that live in town walk to Walmart.
Well, for Moundsville, it's a good thing. There are people coming from a number of miles to get to the Moundsville Walmart.
Because now you have shoppers from Ohio, West Virginia, not only just Moundsville, you have people coming from all over this area coming to Walmart.
I don't have a problem with stores like that, other than they're so big, and every time I get on one of their disability carts, it runs out of fuel before I get back.
Kids, I think, do hang out there. I think that's kind of weird. That is definitely a thing that people do. I think that's really weird, though.
Well, if it hadn't been Walmart, it'd have been something else, because times change. Right there's a pharmacy, that's Rite Aid. But time has changed, gentlemen, and if it wasn't Walmart, it'd have been something else. It'd have been something else.
I had already been interested in like ghosts, legends, and lore, different things like that, and I had already been kind of investigating the paranormal with my friends with Paranormal Quest, and we had visited a museum in Gettysburg. It's called the International Museum of Spiritual Investigations or something like that. And I had just started a little diner right after I already had my gym going, both of which are going now, and I had a poker room, had a small room in the diner, and I didn't want to put poker machines in, and I just went on this trip with my friends and went through the museum and looked at it like, I could do something better. Make it more engaging for people who investigate and also people who are just curious about it. And that's how I got started. Took $50, I allocated and said $50, and I'm going to get something started with it. So I started just collecting ghost stories and getting a couple creepy items that I thought people would find interesting, and people started donating because they said, this is in my house, it creeps me out, I don't want it in my house, so I would get the item, collect their story.
The way the economy is now, I think you have to be more creative and think outside the box. You have to look for your opportunities. You have to build network and connect with other people and try to work together that you all find a good solution. If you're out there on your own and you don't want to put out the energy and effort, you're going to suffer.
We do custom kitchens here. We
do approximately 1 kitchen a day, which involves up to 20, 25 cabinets per day. We employ 14 people full-time. We build everything here, stain, finish, assemble. We have an install crew that does the installation.
Schottner's Cabinets is one of the older businesses here. Very, very quality work and top-of-the-line cabinets for anybody rebuilding or fixing up their homes. He does a great job and stands by his work.
I think these things are cyclical, yes, and even the dreams can be cyclical, I think. There is a great desire locally, and not just Moundsville, but throughout West Virginia, that there could be a return, but wedded with that desire for a return to the more prosperous old times. There is a looking forward, and I think there's a lot of young people in the state right now, and in Moundsville and this area that really are looking forward and have an imaginative vision about what the future might hold. And I think that's worthy of great praise and support.
We began our farm shortly after we met about 6 years ago, and we bought our first set of cattle right before our wedding, which was in the summer of 2012. We realized that we are extremely into healthy eating, which caused us to then decide to go entirely grass-fed. Historically, this has always been a coal area, so people were focused on working in the coal mines and not necessarily on having a farm, or at least a farm that actually produced an income.
So I had always heard growing up that a lot of old-time dairy farmers would drive a school bus. It just made a nice fit. They would get up, they'd milk the cows, they'd get on the bus, get the kids to school, go home, do some farm work. They may milk the cows before the afternoon run, or they might do it after, and then do a little work in the evening, and that was it. It was a fairly good fit. You had your summers off, you had your holidays off, middle of the day. So I went down there, and I heard they were looking for drivers, and turns out they're always looking for drivers.
This is cocoa, and clove, and cinnamon, and that's Frosty.
Tourism in Moundsville is the heart of what keeps us alive. New Vrindavan, the Krishna colony, is the largest tourist attraction in the city or in Marshall County, and they bring in over 50,000 a year. The penitentiary brings in about 40,000 people a year.
This structure behind me is the former West Virginia State Penitentiary. It operated between the summer of 1866, closed in March of 1995. It was ranked in the top 5 most violent institutions in the nation, to the point where the Department of Justice actually nicknamed it Blood Alley. So that's just how violent that place was, especially when you have a documented 998 deaths on just 10 acres of property, and those are just the documented deaths. Of those 998 deaths, there were 94 documented executions, 85 by hanging, 9 in the electric chair. Plus you gotta take into consideration the deaths that just came from inmate to inmate violence. I mean, it was, as one of my late bosses put it, it was probably one of the bloodiest tracts of land in the United States. Well, some of the more notable historical attributes of the facility, it did house Kathleen Maddox, who was Charles Manson's mother. She was in for armed robbery at a Charleston gas station, from what I'm told. Charles did write a letter from out in California to the warden here, Bordenkircher, asking to be transferred here because he wanted to be close to his family members, which were up in McMecken, which is 3 miles up the river, which is where he was watched while his mother was here. And he also thought he would get better treatment here, which that probably, just my opinion, probably would not be the case. Because this facility, it didn't matter who you were, what reputation you came in with, or what reputation you earned inside the walls. Anyone could be got.
I don't particularly believe in ghosts, but at the same time, there's so much violent history at the penitentiary that spirits could linger there. The spirits of the Indians could linger at the Mound. And they do a big business in that.
We do a great business based on paranormal activity. We do a great business based on paranormal activity. And there's a rule of thumb. For every dollar spent on tourism, for every time you purchase a ticket to tour the penitentiary, $3 is spent in the local economy. Whether that is to put gas in your car, or to go to a restaurant and eat, or to shop on Jefferson Avenue, that's an additional $3 in the economy. Last year, this facility alone was responsible for putting $1.9 million in the economy. Again, we try to protect that in that we don't want it to be, we don't want Ouija boards in here, we don't want seances in here, It's people that want to come. And when we first started this, we had no idea what we were doing. We had no idea what this was. And so we just called them ghost hunts. And we were trained by the attendees. And they said, we're not ghost hunters, we're paranormal investigators. So it's a whole market of people out there who want to do this. Some of them are extremely serious, and some of them are just here to have fun and take pictures all night long and see what they can come up with.
It was weird growing up in a town with a prison because, mainly because there was an ice cream shop right across from it. There's a little place called the Marshall Dairy. So in the summer, that the pen had no air conditioning, so they just had the windows open. And you'd be walking to the ice cream place and you hear prisoners yell out at you like, "Hey, what are you getting? What are you doing?" They would totally yell out the windows at you, and you'd just kind of walk faster and be like, "Mint chocolate chip, get me out of here." It was weird because you could hear things going on in the prison, or it was strange. It was super strange.
That type of volume of money is not the same as industry. I don't think industry will ever come back to Moundsville. Coal might come back a little bit, but as far as the manufacturing part, the glass industry, imports have taken that away from America. With the gas and oil, that's another thing. That's another shot in the arm, but another generation or two down the road, will that be gone at the rate that they're going?
I'm going to say something that's insane. I always think that they should legalize weed because it's like the one way that I can I know a lot of people will be like, no, that's a completely wrong idea. But I always think, okay, it's surrounded by 5 states, right? If they're first, they have to be first. If they're first, they have all this natural, they have rivers that you can, whitewater raft on. They have, the tourism thing could just boom. And I feel like if they would do that and they'd just be progressive enough to just be first, that their economy would just be fixed in I don't know, maybe a year or two. Maybe that's too optimistic, but I think it would fix a lot of problems. Now I'm gonna seem like a total pothead pinko commie, but that's what everybody thinks I am anyway, so it doesn't matter. Yeah, if my mom's friends see this, it's over.
As I told you, I'm a West Virginian by birth, but I'm also a West Virginian by choice. I've lived in many different communities throughout the state, from the Eastern Panhandle to the Northern Panhandle to North Central West Virginia. And I think that we have a lot of raw, untapped resources here, whether it is technology, mining, agriculture. We have a lot of things that benefit our state. I don't think we do a very good job of tapping into those things. And right now, my children want to stay in the state. I don't know if they're going to be afforded that opportunity without a lot of growth coming from within.
If you don't have history, you don't have a vision. You always have to have your history to see where you've been in the past and where you need to go to the future, and just being able to work off of that to make it a better town for your community.